ready? Start the meeting?
Get your hammer.
Okay, welcome everybody to the Community Economic Development Committee meeting. I think there's agendas and information on the table there. And let's go around and make introductions, and if you're up first, right? So you guys can sit at the table if you like. Just grab a seat. Okay.
I'm helping represent.
Okay, that'll be fine. So John Weddleton, the chair.
Mandy Honest, Business License Official Clerk's Office.
Dick Train Assembly.
Ryan Yell, planning.
Oh, it's Rich Beasley, 8K Fuzzy Buds.
Pete Peterson, Assembly.
Amanda Bozer, Clerk's Office. Erica McConnell, Office of Economic and Community Development.
Deanne at Health Department.
Jason Brandeis, I'm the attorney for Catalyst Cannabis Company.
Will Schneider, Catalyst Cannabis Company.
Kyle Benton, Isidore. Dave McConnell, Isidore. Jack, I'll be on the agenda at some point on this web, but I have a seat.
Good, thanks for coming. So, first one on the agenda is, oh, I'm sorry, we didn't get you guys. Dennis?
Dennis Millhouse. James Millhouse. Eric Montoya.
Mike Cooper with LCG Land Tech.
Okay, thanks. So Ryan, you want to just go through this a little bit?
Sure.
John, is this being recorded?
Pardon?
Okay, you need to let the public probably know it's being recorded.
Oh, this is being recorded.
That was council.
All right, so the first case on the agenda is for Catalyst Cannabis Company. They're applying for a license to operate a marijuana cultivation facility within the I-1 district located in Newtown. Facility is located directly on Eagle Street, generally north of East International Airport Road and south of 48th Avenue. Facility is going to total approximately 4,200 square feet of cultivation space. And planning department and staff recommend approval subject to conditions 1 through 7 as stated in the staff report and assembly resolution. And the petitioner's representative is present to answer any questions you have.
So is that Rich or Jason?
Jason and Will.
Okay, good. So did you saw this and you saw the comments? Is there any issues here?
No.
The record show Amy Dembowski just joined us. So any questions from assembly members? Okay.
Well, I just wanted to bring up the issue of the odor observations, because this was raised last time with Danish Gardens, and there was some discussion about it. And, we asked Deanne to come from the health department to talk about it, but I think we kind of got off a little bit on the wrong foot discussing it with the last, at the last work session for Danish Gardens. But the DHHS has been asking for this with the cultivation facilities, mostly because odor and odor impacts on neighboring properties is one of the biggest concerns with the cultivation facilities, based on experience visiting places in Colorado and that sort of thing. And the idea behind asking the licensee to take a weekly observation at their property line is for both to help them understand that they may be having an impact or not on their neighbors, and to keep some records for the health department if there is some sort of complaint, that the health department can have a good, good communication with the applicant about, or the licensee about what the licensee's observations have been. I'm told from, and I'm sorry if I'm taking on your thunder, but we're told from the health department that there isn't a lot of standards about how often the filtration, the filters need to be changed, how well they work, and that sort of thing. So this is an attempt to both help the licensee gain an understanding of any impacts they may be having, and then also help the health department, like I said. So this has been a consistent comment from the HHS on cultivation facilities, but I know that there was Gardens, and the assembly did not place that condition on Danish Gardens because Danish Gardens they said they had a closed loop system, that they weren't venting any of their air to the outside. But I wanted to bring it to your attention just because it had been something that was discussed, and there was some discomfort with it at the last meeting. I would point out that the last condition was proposed to be a daily observation, and we've talked with the health department and suggested that they be weekly observations rather than daily.
Eric, I got a question for you on 4, page 1. Normal sense of smell. How do you define normal sense of smell? Do we have any of those machines coming in yet that are supposed to be able to detect it? Because normal varies from everybody in this room.
So all that the machine, the nasal ranger does is it dilutes the ambient air by a certain amount at whatever you set the machine by. So it doesn't give you any sort of objective reading. I think that certain people know that they've had certain, health conditions that have affected their smell, and so you clearly wouldn't be asking those people to do this. But I don't know, maybe Dan, you can talk a little bit about how you deal with odor complaints.
There's a scale that's used, and it's an odor intensity, and it is somewhat subjective, but it's everything from undetectable to a very strong smell on a scale of 1 to 5, and so that would be identified by whoever's taking the readings.
I know you were here before you came here with animal control, and there's some people that are nose blind to cats, to dogs, and other people are hypersensitive, so we gotta make sure when we use this in here, we have some sort of a definition, John, because I'm afraid one person will say, oh, it's really odorous, another person will say, I don't see a problem with it. So it's when you add a normal sense of smell, it just worries me. There's no real answer to that question, so something we're gonna have to deal with as we get into this.
So how would you do it? So you have your operation, and how would your plan?
Well, I think in ours, we have to do perimeter checks every day, actually, to do the same type of thing. But I can smell marijuana outside if it's getting outside, and I think most people actually can. Depends if it's offensive and how strong it is, it's really what it comes down to. And we have a filtration system in all our rooms, and we actually have a closed loop system as well, but we still will have carbon filters in all the rooms. Even with a closed loop system, you're still gonna have to have a little bit of, most of the time, I think that health and safety might require a certain minimal amount of air exchange between rooms anyway, so you're gonna have to have a little intake and outtake of air regardless of the closed loop system. So there's still potential for even potentially that you're still gonna do some of the smell. So we're not planning on really using our carbon filters. Ours is all closed loop as well. We do have carbon filters in every single room. And that's really the best smell mitigation that is available at the moment, and it seems to be working pretty well. And fortunately, we're in a really good area too, so we're in good relations with our neighbors, so we'll just keep on monitoring it. We'll actually be monitoring it daily, but reporting it weekly.
What's the penalty? Suppose you go and you say, boy, this place reeks, and you recorded that it's fine.
But I think potentially, there could be action taken by the Marijuana Control Board, but it starts with.
Well, I think when I read through this, my first concern was that this is just a super subjective standard, and I think that obviously dealing with odor mitigation is something that involves there's a lot of moving pieces, and the way that the resolution is written, it states specifically keep records in order to aid in any odor complaint investigation. So I look at what the licensee is doing as part of the process. So if you have complaints from neighbors, and then you have a licensee doing either daily or weekly monitoring, and their records indicate no smell or nothing out of the ordinary, then you've got like a factual dispute based on a subjective standard, which is going to be really difficult from an enforcement standpoint. So I think that really what you're looking at here is trying to establish some kind of a baseline, and whether that is based on what the individuals reporting themselves or what community members are saying. The penalty, it seems like if there's not compliance, that means then you're not in compliance with the requirements for the special land use permit. And that can be really troubling if you can lose your entire permit and license based on subjective standard like odor. But I think that those kind of subjective standards are, you can prove subjectivity when you have enough information. And if you have, let's just say, hundreds of complaints, and then the facility is saying, well, we didn't smell anything, you know, essentially it's the standard of what's a jury gonna believe. So I think that documenting is really important, and whether you're using scientific methods like the nasal ranger, or just, you know, maybe experts who are familiar with marijuana odor, documenting is really critical.
If I could add on to that, the code enforcement, and I assume this is also true for health department enforcement, we're not looking to run out and slap a violation on the facility. We're looking to achieve compliance. So when there are complaints, the investigators go out and they try to evaluate, is there a violation or is there not? And then they try to work with the licensee, the applicant, to resolve it, to bring, you know, it's not their desire to go out and say, oh, we're taking away your license because somebody smelled something bad. They're trying to get compliance with the requirements. And it's only after multiple, you know, a significant length of time of trying to work with the licensee, if the licensee is uncooperative and not working to resolve the issue, do we get down to the point where we're talking about fines, where we're talking about, you know, going to the assembly and saying, okay, there's an issue here that we can't get resolved. So it's not that like one day they go out and, oh, here's a, you know, $100 fine kind of thing.
That could be, but I think our experience on many things is your neighbor with the most sensitive nose who is the criteria. And you can have that person call in daily because they smell it and no one else can, and then you have a problem. So it is something to prepare for, where it's like, what's really too noisy, and for how long, and similar with odor. I have a question on we've seen every applicant talks about these carbon filters, so the capacity of those, what do you think? The number you have and how big is it?
Yeah, well, we base it on the square footage of the room, and they have recommendations for the different size carbon filters. So we have rather large carbon filters for each 1,000 square feet or so.
And are they based on experience of other marijuana facilities?
I think the manufacturer actually comes out with a spec on square footage coverage. And it's based on the CFM fans they use. So there's a fan that matches each carbon filter, and it's matched up to the room size.
But it's not specifically tested on marijuana, it's just.
Yeah, no, carbon, activated carbon just neutralizes odors, free radical ions of this.
And this is kind of an industry standard approach.
Well, Mr. Chairman, so if this didn't seem to be working as effectively as you hoped, you could add an ionizer or ionizers additionally?
You could, but potentially that has an impact on the product. I mean, you could vent into another room and have that room scrubbed additionally with an ionizer, is what some people could do as an additional mitigation measure. But having an ionizer in the room actually sometimes decreases the potency and flavor of the actual marijuana product. So if you were going to do that, you want to take the air out of that room, put it into another room, and deionize the air before expelling it.
Thank you.
Question for Ryan. I was working off of this map. Is it going to be the same as this, but without the staff recommendation? Because I got to look at doing this. I
This
got
was,
about a week and a half
yeah, this
ago.
was what they turned in and put on the portal. So this is what the applicant turned in with the state information.
So it's in here.
It's in
Just
there,
right,
yeah,
okay.
it's just not the staff analysis for the.
So it suggests here that you're getting a nasal link. Is that right? It says best method, this is under your, and I don't have the page numbers out of this, sorry, I had an earlier version. So best method to determine effectiveness of odor containment is have an individual walk around the exterior and evaluate smell. Also, then you mentioned nose telescope or nose rangers. So were you just talking generally, or is that something you look at?
Do you have the page number right here?
It's,
So the problem with that,
this didn't have page numbers, I got it a week and a half ago. You know where
The narrative.
it's near the end of the application. Do you have a form? Maybe just a form.
But this is under odor testing.
68 of 203.
168.
68.
Because if you're gonna buy one, they could borrow it maybe.
Yeah.
We can lease it to the.
And that is, I think we just, several of us put together this plan, obviously. I think that is a future endeavor and that the best method would be to do that, but I don't know necessarily in the budget.
Yeah, I don't think that this necessarily is a statement of a commitment that we're gonna invest in that, but that identifying that there are methodologies out there, and this is one that might be.
I was impressed.
Yeah, it's, we'll let you know when we purchase it.
Big part.
When that's the end, if health insurance has ordered, needs a ranger yet.
No,
Is there an intent?
not that I'm aware of.
Would you
I think-
check and let us know, because we keep hearing this reference to a nasal razor. It would be nice to have one, be less intrusive than a stingray or something like that. We bought those before.
No more stingrays, please.
No more stingrays.
My understanding is there's only one place that you can get certified to use it. I don't know where that is, but we can look into it.
If you would let us know the cost and how many people need to be certified with it. Thank you.
I had a couple things going through here. One is I was unclear, looking at it like 3 different site plans and did it all match. Some are suggesting there's an old building torn down, a new one built, or you're gonna be in the old one, and it wasn't clear where in each of those buildings. What is the plan? Did you, just a sec, Ryan, you know where it's gonna be in your company?
Yes, I did follow up with the architect because there was some discrepancy in the plans that were provided to me versus what was provided to the overview. So I did get the final site plan, and it is Title 21 compliant.
Which page?
I have a different packet with different numbering than you do, but the site plan is going to be right after the maps.
So is it the new building or the old?
No, it's the old building, the section of the old building, it's the easternmost section, 4,000 square feet in the old building. Currently, the landowner is starting the planning for the future warehouse, so that's where a lot of the zoning and Title 21 compliance came in with this future addition and the landscaping, parking, and so they were going through that process anyway, so I used a lot of their material becoming compliant with Title 21.
Looks like that's on page 12, 203.
And then this isn't so much just yours, but reading all these packets, they're very, very different. We get some have incredible detail on the chemicals they're using in the grows, and some have shown they have a contract with the security company, and we get plot plan pictures with all the cameras and all that. And then yours, it kind of says we will reinsure that. So it kind of says yes, we will do all these things, but there's no details in there. And I don't know if that's something that we're worried about. It's just compared to some other ones, this one lacks.
Is there like a specific area that you find lacking?
I went through it some. Well, I don't know if they're lacking. I'd say some maybe they need too much detail. Right. I don't know. I mean, if you do all that you say, they're good. Staff agrees with that. And then going through some of these others, we have a picture of the camera location and a little sketch of what area it will cover. Super detailed for the entire building. Right?
Well, I mean,
It's a discrepancy.
in response to that, I mean, you start this process was started in May with the state. Now we've gotten bids and we're further along the process, so we actually have those diagrams, but we didn't when we submitted these applications. And so now that we've gone through the construction process, the bidding process, we actually have those diagrams, but when we actually submit them, it was speculative and, just planning at that point. And it wasn't a requirement for either application, so it wasn't done prior to those things, and now it's done, so if necessary, we can supply that information. So,
I don't know if it is, but it's just,
it's also, that's the main concern with the state application is that you have to post that stuff and all this public knowledge, and now everybody knows our security system. So I mean, thankfully, it's kind of worked out for us that that isn't public information at the moment. We haven't displayed our security camera placement in our facility and where our safe's gonna be. And so I think that we're at a huge advantage where a lot of people have had to publicly display their whole security setup. So, and I think that's a big problem with having all these applications publicly available.
That's a good point. So any comments from anyone?
Well, on a different subject, I noticed that when you had your public meeting, one person showed up.
Correct.
I think that's the lowest number that I've seen in any of my previous applicants. So, and I sent out a good number of notices.
121, I think, yeah.
So, evidently, there's not a whole lot of opposition to you being cultivated in that area.
Yeah, I mean, the direct neighbors are all industrial, and they don't really, none of them really face each other, so it's very little interaction that you see with anybody. So I think everybody kind of keeps to themselves, okay with everything.
Okay, thanks. Mr. Trainee?
Question, I was looking on page 1, item 3, one or more licensee or affiliate owes or past due tax fees or fines, is that taken care of?
I haven't heard anything back, but it's a $22 fine for the library for one of the
Okay.
So,
I would suggest you pay before it comes in front of the assembly. Get your pennies, it'll be the library.
We can discuss that. I don't know which number it is, so I got.
William Schneider.
Oh, that's me.
Right when you got a library card.
It's like, that's what I'm trying to do.
Do you know specifically what books he took out?
Probably had a cultivate or something.
Haven't even been able to.
There's another, I have a note here going through your water use. At one point you say you recycle all and you won't be putting any out, and then as you go through, there's another quantity that will be dumped into the sewer system, and then there was a third quantity. So it wasn't consistent throughout. Is there?
Yeah, I mean, all I can say that is that if we are implementing a drain to waste system, so we'll be using most of the water. All the water will be in a medium PMOS, so there will be very little runoff. I think we estimated a certain amount of runoff just to have a number in there potentially. The number fluctuates because when we flush plants where we actually run gallons of water through the plants, then there actually will be a substantial amount of runoff on those days, which is very infrequent. But most of the time, there'll actually be minimal to no waste of water. I think that might be where the different numbers came in, that sometimes there's flushing going on where we actually do an estimate of the gallons, but we're an average. I can't remember what the question was, the municipalities and our water plan. But so I think it's really the amount of what wastewater came from flushing. But on day-to-day operation, it's very minimal going down the drains.
Okay. And now, in some cases, we see that one coming up, they have one that takes it, it's septic company takes the water away. Why would they do that? I mean, is there a problem with the water?
I do not think AWU had a concern with wastewater going into the sewer system.
You said they do not?
That's my understanding.
Okay, thanks. So any other comments, thoughts from the committee? Do we want to have a recommendation for this going forward?
I'll make a recommendation, we approve this, send it to the assembly.
Second. Okay, any opposition? Okay, good. Thank you.
Can I just ask a follow-up question?
Yes, please.
But in all seriousness, regarding the library fine, when that is paid, would you like us to submit like a statement or something from the library? I know when there are tax bills, the departments talk to each other, but from the library, is that something that we can submit a letter or a statement or something?
They should send me notification that it's
Okay.
been paid for.
Okay.
But anything extra I get is always helpful.
Okay.
It may just be a minor thing, but I don't want somebody to put all the process, the money they've spent, get it from the assembly, and the assembly member to say, we can't approve this one, because it was $22 library fine.
I have a feeling it's going to the library.
May sound ridiculous for me to cross that.
Yeah, oh, yeah, of course.
Amanda?
Just so everyone knows that if the fine isn't paid and it goes before the assembly, this will still be approved, and there's the opportunity for the applicant to pay it
Or an assuming member could decide to try and
before the
stop it.
clerk's office notifies the AMCO that it's been.
We have an issue with him too anyway. We'll talk about that. And decide what their strict limits are, sure.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Okay, thanks. So next one up is Fuzzy Buzz. You guys want to?
Yep, I'm
Jordan?
representing Rich Beasley and Jamie Milhouse.
All right, Fuzzy Butts, another marijuana cultivation facility. They are within a B3 district of Midtown. There is a code requirement that cultivation be co-located, or retail be co-located with cultivation in B3. As of yesterday, they have turned in an initial application for marijuana retail at the same facility. The facility is located on Eagle Street as well, but this is north of Northern Lights Boulevard and south of Fire Week. Facility will hold approximately 1,100 square feet of cultivation space. And planning department recommends approval subject to the conditions 1 through 11 as written in staff report. When we talked with Rich yesterday, some of those conditions they have already met and or are pursuing compliance.
Mr. Chairman, I follow up on one thing.
Yeah.
So as Ryan said, you're required, if you have a cultivation in the B3, you're required to have a retail store. Because the state has been doing cultivation before they address retail at this very beginning of this whole process, I recommended to the planning department that they don't say you can't open your cultivation facility until you actually also open your retail store, because that felt like an unfair burden on the applicant. So I recommended that the condition be that as long as they have a complete application for their retail store into the department, then they can begin operating their cultivation facility with the understanding that if they don't get their retail approval from the assembly, then their cultivation has to go away. So that is a risk that the applicant has to decide whether or not to take, but I just wanted to let you know that the recommendation came from me not to hold their cultivation facility up, awaiting the approval of their retail store, despite the fact that that's really what the code says, just at this beginning of time.
See, you just kind of hit on what I'm saying. This code, I thought we couldn't issue, as I'm looking at the page 10 of 141. The petitioner has, it's clear right here what's going on. The petitioner has initiated a state application for co-located and attached, so they haven't met the requirement yet. And so my understanding as I read the code is before we can issue, obviously we're not issuing the retail license, but how did we, my recollection was in D3 specifically, we couldn't say yes unless they had both state licenses. But I haven't looked at it for a very long time, so
it says, marijuana cultivation facilities are permitted in the B3 district when co-located with and attached to a marijuana retail sales establishment.
and there's no marijuana sales retail establishment that's been licensed by the state, so. How do you, this is like basically ignoring the code, so. I don't see.
I would call it stretching because they do have, they have a complete state license, and for all I know, is your retail store up today, yesterday or today at MCB?
No, basically we have our state application all turned in, fees all done, and then we just turned in the special land use yesterday for the retail in hopes that to showcase, hey, we're already at that next step. We're not just saying, hey, we're doing 6 months from now. We're actually already trying to get that approved, and I don't know if there is a possibility of doing the special land use for both, since they're both the same process, and knocking 2 birds with 1 stone. I don't know if that's an option, but that's why we wanted to try to get everything done before we go in front of the board and say, well, we do have a depot. We already submitted it. We're ready to move forward.
Do you know when your retail store is scheduled at the marijuana control board?
We haven't been given.
You haven't been given
No.
it yet?
So again, we're going back to the code here, and the code doesn't give, when we're talking about law, there's certain things that have to be met, and administrations don't have the right through regulation to ignore law. So if the law says you can't operate until you have both licenses, or the state, how do we issue it? So that's what I'm asking.
It doesn't say, so this is a local requirement, it's not a state requirement.
But it's local code, which is law.
So you can say notwithstanding this, we allow this, which happens.
So we could say, basically notwithstanding, basically we can put a parameter on there that's saying the day that they have the state license for retail issued. Or we could say,
I don't think it's related to the state license, it's related to the local approval.
no, okay, let me back up. In order to operate a marijuana facility of any kind in the municipality of Anchorage, you have to have both a state and city license.
Correct.
Right? So we made a rule, and I'm not saying it's a good rule, bad rule, whatever, I'm just saying what we've done. We made a rule that said in B3, you can't operate unless you have a retail and a cultivation license.
We said you can't operate a cultivation facility unless you have a retail sales establishment.
And you don't have establishment until you have a license.
Okay.
So you can't have a city license until you have a state license. Or we could give you the city license, but you can't operate until you have a state license.
Correct.
That's my
Do
point.
you have to be operating? I mean, many people get licenses and then they don't open for 2 or 3 months.
Absolutely, but my point is here, this to me is kind of like a clear, so I'm asking like, I mean, maybe we just need to tweak the code, I don't know. But to me, why set rules if you're not gonna follow them?
I think what I was trying to do is recognize that at the beginning of this process, the state has decided we're going to address cultivation and testing first. And so the applicant did not have the opportunity to take both their cultivation and their retail license to the state at the same time. So at no fault of their own, they were not permitted to kind of meet the city requirements. And so here at the beginning of this process, it felt unfair to penalize them for the state, how the state has managed their schedule. I agree with what you're saying, but I think it can be handled through like a notwithstanding provision.
Okay, well, that's what I'm getting at, we have to do something, we can't just say because you don't feel they were treated fairly, I mean, that's irrelevant, frankly. I mean, the code is what the code says. And so, and I agree, I mean, we've just been faster than the state has been. And so we have, I think we need to run this through the Department of Law too, and just make sure that we're clear in how this is done, because again, I know it's gonna happen. We made this big stake and B3 was a big fight in allowing it in certain areas. And so what I can see happening is, you know, and I'm not saying with your establishment, but with some establishment, I can see us going ahead saying, go ahead, go cultivate, and then their retail license for some reason gets rejected. And then you're gonna have the whole, well, they're already up and running. It's really not fair, even though they're going into it with their eyes open. So my point is, we just need to, I mean, if you're gonna have a standard, you have to equally apply it across the board. And the code clearly says you have to have, in my view, what I recall and what you read tells me you have to have a retail license. It doesn't say you have to have an application into the state.
You have to have a city approval.
You can't have the city approval without the state license.
No, you can't.
Well, that's not what the code says. The code says in order, and read what you just said to me again.
Marijuana cultivation facilities are permitted in the B3 district when co-located with and attached to a marijuana retail sales establishment.
Right, and it clearly says they don't have marijuana retail sales establishment, and we can't issue that in city license. And they can't operate, the city code says they can't operate without both licenses. You said 5 minutes ago that they don't meet the standard. But my question is, if there's a way that we can build in something that, whether it may be a notwithstanding, and that might be fine, but we can't just pretend standards not there. Frankly, I mean, this is one of the issues that I've had often when we get into discussions between what the code says and what the assembly intended, and then administrative rules that just kind of happen without us knowing. And that's not the role of the administration. The role is to, when we pass a law, yes, to make sure that we're adhering to code, and if there's something we need to do different or change in code, let's do that. But if this is gonna become an issue because the state's too slow, I think we need to proactively try to address it. So I'm not opposed to a notwithstanding if legal says that's okay, but I wanna clearly identify that this is obviously might be a problem. So it's just something that we should just kind of vet and make sure we have a process. I'm not saying I'm opposed to this license, I'm just saying it's, again, this is new, so we're just trying to hammer it out. That was my point.
Pete?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, I think once we get past the initial stage, I don't think this will be a problem. It's just right now they're doing the cultivation first and then testing and then retail is going to be the last licenses that are going to be issued. So I think in the startup phase, we're facing this sort of a catch-22, which probably I don't see that being a problem once they, people are allowed to submit cultivation and retail licenses at the same time once the beginning process reaches in, and then they get into a normal operating procedure at the state level.
No, I agree with you. I'm always a little leery when it comes to when I hear administrations just saying, well, you're just telling me it works this way, so we're just going to let you do it. Well, you don't really have the authority to just do that. That's our job.
So could you explain to me how this notwithstanding, is that just where we approve this
Well,
notwithstanding? This
yeah,
vote?
so, and you see it all the time with referrals to P&Z, frankly. You see it, that's why I said I'm not opposed to a notwithstanding.
Notwithstanding the code requirement that X happen, we're not gonna make X happen.
We've used that for over 20 years.
Yeah.
She's smiling.
That was, I think it
Because
was,
I use it routinely.
it was an Alan Teshi
It's Alan
invention.
Teshi, it was great.
Yeah, it was Alan Teshi, but we do it all the time, and you see it all the time with planning and zoning. So there's a lot of code requirements that says this has to go to planning and zoning. And you see administrations and legislators all the time say, well, notwithstanding the referral to P&Z, so we skip it and we just go straight to it. So I'm not opposed to it because it is a tool that is used. I just want to clearly make sure that if we identify this as maybe an issue, and I think Pete's right, I think this is probably just going to be in the startup phase. So I just want to make sure that we're not setting somebody up for somebody else to say, well, you didn't contemplate this fully, and I guess that's where I was going.
Okay, and it's just to wave a flag then. So we could move this forward on schedule. We just highlight that that's not.
Yeah.
I think we need to amend condition 10 to say notwithstanding.
Okay, yeah.
And I did actually run this by legal, and we maybe have missed the notwithstanding bit, but that was kind of the intent.
Well, that's the only thing I saw when I was looking at this, because of course, I'm looking at all my boxes, saying which ones are and are not tech. So I just, like I said, I just don't want to get them before the assembly on the night, and I can think of one or two people that would look at that and say, well, and so I want to fully contemplate it, and I want you to be able to confidently stand up and say, no, I talked to legal, and this.
And that's why I raised this issue. I wanted everybody to understand what was happening here.
Yeah, that was the only thing I had.
Pete?
Well, are we finished with this discussion? Because I had a couple other
Well,
questions.
actually, let me go back to Rich then.
I just have one real quick before is there any possibility with us having submitted them and if it gets approved on the retail special land use beforehand, or at least it's considered complete, is there an opportunity for us to do them at the same time to alleviate that issue where since they're the same process?
Well, this comes up Tuesday.
Right, but it's they're reviewing it tomorrow on Friday, and it's the exact same, almost identical to the cultivation because it's the same property, it's the same process, everything else. That's why I'm asking.
Well,
right?
can I?
Yeah, please.
You're the only license that's before the assembly right now is the cultivation license. So you actually have to go through the process and submit for your retail. So we have to put that on our agenda separately.
Okay.
So, but if they, they're meeting this week, so if they say, they've already approved our license, basically, it's kind of a non-issue. I mean,
Yeah.
because we look at it and we say, okay, they're checked with it. So all you have to do now is come in back and get your retail license from us.
Okay.
But if something comes up in the retail process and you don't get your retail license from the municipality, even if you have one for the state, then they still you're in this issue with B3.
Right.
You guys are in the unique situation.
Very unique. And
Yeah.
That's what we're trying to.
So I think you're gonna be fine. And the conversation that you heard here, it wasn't to try to kill your application. It was just like Pete said, this is the initial initial, we're going through it, you're the first B3 kind of
I
go
get it.
through it. Yeah, so we just wanna make sure that every T's crossed and every I is dotted, that way when this comes up on Tuesday night, there's no confusion. But you're still gonna have to run through the process with us again.
Okay,
Just
okay.
because we have to, Amanda, you can talk about her too, putting things on the agenda.
Yeah, just to echo what Assemblymember DeBossi's saying, they're looking at your application completeness, and it still has to run through the whole cycle
Okay.
to actually make it on the agenda, and there's not really any way to circumvent that.
Fast track it. No,
Yeah.
fair enough. I wanted to make sure there was an opportunity that we're not just doing the exact same thing over. But the good thing is, if we go through this, we can assume, as long as everything's good, that it should go smoother than this one will. So,
Be your test case.
yes, the test dummies. Okay.
You do have the best name out of all of them.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. And when I got this packet, a couple of weeks ago, I just sent you guys on. It said that there was a letter saying that you had insufficient power supply from the utility when you.
For our upgrade. Yes, we have alleviated that, and I do have a document that says it is now approved. And so that was for Mr. Ryan.
And also there was limited parking available, like, there was like 6 parking spaces or something?
Well, we only need 3,
Three?
and we have 7, I believe it is right now. But we are actually gonna be eliminating 1 to help with some other things, and then also to do the pedestrians, walkway, extend this out from the wall, so we have a little bit more room for our customers to be able to walk. So we have more than enough parking. Yeah, we got a huge parking lot, luckily, so.
Anything else? You know, I have a question. You have 2 350-gallon tanks that'll be pumped out by Isaacs. Why not just dump it into this?
Well, originally, when we started creating this process, we were under the impression that we weren't allowed to do that. It sounds like that might have changed since the original discussion, but that was our game plan, and we're sticking to it. Of course, if we can, in the future, eliminate that process and just go down the sewers, then that is something we will look into, because it's obviously a lot cheaper to go that route. But initially, this was the game plan that we thought would be the best way to get approved and to comply with what the city's asking.
So where would Isaacs pump the water? They'll pump it out of yours, pump it down the sewer?
Yeah, we don't ask that as long as it's approved.
It's
Not your
perfectly,
problem,
it's
huh?
perfectly pH 5.862. It's perfect, it's organic, it's should be able to be done. I understand this.
Originally, that was what we were understanding, but like I said, we started this process 6 months ago, roughly, maybe longer, so.
And Mr. Chair, I did follow up with AGM staff, and that amount of liquid that they were planning on putting into a holding tank, they were to dump that into their sewer infrastructure, and they would be able to handle it just fine.
So there is an opportunity for
So you check with Able and they're good with this?
They would give me the all clear.
So that would be something that we would probably like to proceed with, if that's possible.
See, we saved you money. Use Isaac.
Hey, we appreciate it. Yeah.
Well, so I mean, a lot of these things, when we move them forward, it says, kind of, we approve or not. So we approve it kind of based on what their plan is. Now are they stuck because it's in there? Should we mention they don't have to do that, or is it?
Sorry, could you say that again?
Well, a lot of times we'll say maybe I'm thinking planning commission, but if we get approved something based on their presentation of the
Yeah.
plan they presented, so now are they stuck pumping these tanks, or?
Yeah, just from my perspective, I think if AWU says they can handle it, there's no reason they have to come back to us. She would just dump the water into AWU's system and be happy and not give them any of the pumping system.
It may be helpful for us when we make our recommendation, and I don't know if Erica, because you're kind of fix, deal with an notwithstanding issue, but if we can put some sort of clause in here that gives them, it gives them a little flexibility that says the plan is basically approved, dealing with a notwithstanding issue. And also, and discharge of wastewater is approved,
I know.
like pursuant to AWU standards.
Right, like they don't have to stick with what they said they were gonna do, they have some flexibility.
As long as
I'll work
AWU
out
signs
some
off
language
on it.
Because then that not only addresses what, because we're gonna always go back to the plan, you're right, John, we're always gonna go back to the plan and say, okay, well, in your plan it said this, but if we, knowing ahead of time that they might do something a little easier, we can build into our assembly approval, something that literally says, as long as you're meeting AWU standards, you're good to go, even if it doesn't say that in the plan.
Okay, that's perfect.
Yeah,
I'll work something out.
thank you.
I have a couple, windows, so you're gonna put bulletproof tinting on the windows, then you're gonna put sheetrock on the other
No,
side.
we did the bulletproof on the outside, framed it in by 2x4s, applied sheetrock and plywood with scissors on.
We went over the top, but yes, we eliminated the being able to look through and see inside the location.
Is there any issues there with you're supposed to have windows on your buildings?
We have no commercial design standards, and they have to make sure that nothing's visible from the roadway.
Sounds like you did that.
Yes, we did.
How expensive is bulletproof glass?
Yeah. That was originally.
It doesn't stop a bullet.
It's liable to just, for you to get the right system.
Well, why we got it is the guy, I was just gonna frame it in, so he goes, no, you gotta put this on. He grabbed a sledgehammer, he had like a 3-big window, he hit that thing, it bounced back and broke his nose. And another guy came on, hit 10 times and it wouldn't break, but it spidered. Then he got a crowbar, and he still took about 15 minutes to get that window out. So, he was on it, so it's pretty impressive. Okay.
Are you ready, do you have any more questions, you ready for a motion?
Well, I could, and so you've read all these conditions and understand our discussion here with the two other points.
Yeah, absolutely.
Got it,
We're,
okay.
yeah, we're more than understanding of them, and we're working on that before we came here, so.
I make a motion that we work with the assembly for consideration with the two amendments that Eric is gonna draft for us.
Sorry. Any opposition to that? Okay, good, thank you.
Thank you.
Good luck with your retail.
Thank you.
You have a work session on this?
Yeah, so.
Because
the-
that belongs to your committee, John. We want to give every assembly member the opportunity.
It should come.
Do you wanna make sure that, like,
Maybe, the planning staff is talked to.
No, we don't know about a Friday meeting. That's why I wanna tell them
Okay.
this. Is it 1 o'clock on Friday that you,
This one is gonna be 10:30. Because there's other work sessions.
yeah, I just wanna tell these guys, and then, cause then I have to invite my folks too. She's gonna tell them, it's on
Yeah, I think that it-
Friday.
8-4?
No,
155 first floor.
So it's 4:30.
Right.
We just got notice to get
Always,
here.
and that's why, it's always
You didn't
the
get notice
last
about
week.
anything.
I haven't
We were
listened to anything
warning you
all
that
the
we
way around.
heard that there would be something on Friday in the afternoon, maybe around 1 o'clock.
That's why I'm like, let's just cut it off at the pass.
We were finding out right as it gets late.
Okay.
Huh? Wow, I don't think it's necessary. But I'm not leadership, so. I mean,
What are we doing around now?
nothing. No, I'm just saying, I think bringing the applicants here to this meeting and then bringing them to a work session again, if we have a problem with one, I think that's when maybe we have a question, but that's okay.
Well, there were some assembly members that told us, well, we're not on the committee, so we're not sure if we're going to vote.
We have some.
You can't vote in a work session either.
Nonetheless, we did this, so.
Why don't you talk to Forrest, I don't know if he comes here, like, he has
What do you think, Sam?
because he's the one who said it. But.
I can only vote. pretty close to get 300 people.
No samples. They're passing out samples, they're in trouble.
They're all griping about this stuff.
What are you talking about?
There's a convention.
Hey, I went to the first one.
Yeah, they didn't advertise this much.
Have you seen, you go to
This is not North of
they have new signs there. No marijuana of any kind is
Okay, so we have the second, how do you pronounce it?
Isidore.
Isidore, okay, good.
Can I state for the record that Mr. McConnell and I are not related?
Okay.
Okay, so yes,
I was
this is,
wondering.
Okay, so Sean?
yep, Sean. Isidore, which is located on International, I guess right across the street from us, Kentucky Park. It's in the I-1 district. They're planning on, in the future, doing both retail and manufacturing. This is just a cultivation facility, and that cultivation facility is going to occupy 12,746 square feet. They're in the current process of working on the site right now. They meet all the applicable Title 21 standards. We have some conditions on there that you guys can see. 12 conditions. I believe they're working through the majority of those though already. We can ask Dave if he's good.
We filled out the form this morning for a snow removal permit agreement with the union. Simon has that, it's working its way through the people need to sign off on it. We've met the conditions, for the most part of zoning, with the exception to one issue currently we have, which is a type A living permit. And,
So the code states that you are required, if you have over 12,000 square feet of cultivation, you're required a type A loading permit. So that's why we made it a condition.
So is that because of cultivation or is just any kind of facility?
it's marijuana specific.
What we did with the parking, or with the loading, is that we made the manufacturing and the cultivation loading requirements the same as general industrial loading requirements, which basically start at 12,000 square feet. That you need a type A berth. A type A berth is like, fits a semi, a tractor trailer. I've spoken with you, and about whether or not this is necessary, and or whether it could be a type B berth, which I think is more for like a box van sort of thing. And I have taken that issue to the traffic engineer to see whether that would be, whether she thinks it's, unreasonable to require this for marijuana cultivation and manufacturing. And, one could imagine that hopefully there's not going to be so much marijuana to fill a tractor trailer. I don't know. I haven't heard back from her yet, but I will definitely follow up with her today, because that might be something that we can get into the package of land use amendments that I talked to. I don't think, yeah, you were there, so yeah, that all of you at yesterday's work session we talked about. So that was why we made this a resolve comment, that if the need for a type A does go away, they would be able to resolve that comment and provide a type B.
And we have a non-conforming determination, we're not required to have a type B. So this benefits us either way.
Sorry, you have?
We have non-determination made by the union, that we're not required to have a type A, so, type A loading permit. Type B loading permit. So if the type A goes away, it's a B requirement, we're not required to provide a B.
That's odd.
Well, the property is existing, the building's existing.
Because when the building was built, so when our non-conforming, the period our non-conforming rights were based on, there wasn't requirements for type A loading birds, there was requirements for type B loading birds, but the property didn't have one, so we have non-conforming rights.
So you get out of having the lower requirement, but it becomes the higher one.
Yeah, because it specifically addressed marijuana.
John? Any comments from Mr. Trainee?
Mandy, so is the library fine on this one, or what's the fines on this one?
So this one is just from the finance department, I didn't count number, but it's for, Mr. Denton. And I think it looks like it's probably second-hand property tax, but I could be wrong. I have a contact for that, so Diana Flavin would be able to give you the exact.
What's it now?
$1,713.90.
Before it comes to the assembly, I would appreciate you to pay that.
No, it's paid, we've been in mortgage, you know.
Well, you might wanna
I can
get.
check with her, so this was the last review that I had, and I can check and see if that's.
Is it, and it's since August 15th?
This was August 24th. Oh, you know what? Let's see.
Sounds like the property tax.
I think it was paid. It looks like that one was taken care of. So we can get that
Find out,
taken
Mandy,
off.
so we don't have the issue come up on the summit meeting.
Yeah.
I would chase our jail run for a while. That's all, John, thank you.
Pete?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And so, there was a letter dated May 4th from Applicat Electric, said that the house was insufficient.
It hasn't been resolved yet. They're working on it. They're working on some infrastructure projects. They're abandoning a line that crosses International right there that hangs pretty close to our building. And as part of that work, they are going to set our new service, but they're having some trouble with surrounding infrastructure to kind of get that in place. They're supposed to do it like any day. But
We've been working.
We've been
for 6 months
hearing
now,
that for
so.
a long time.
So are they gonna try to underground the line or something?
No, they're gonna stop and they're gonna feed from the other side of International, everything over there, they're just gonna break the connection, feed from both sides.
I see. Okay. All right. Thank you.
So what happens then? So if they don't do this, you can't start operating?
Yeah, we need the electricity to operate anyways.
It's a 2,000 amp service.
Yeah, we have like 150 amp temporary service anyway right now, so we don't have to do that.
So when you look at the Applicat Electric, it says the power capacity is currently, it's not sufficient, but can be upgraded. Do you have any documentation from Applicat that you've asked to be upgraded? Do you have?
We have the applications in the office.
Could you provide us with copies of that? We just wanna show positive, again, like the other applicants, this is a question that's probably gonna come up on Tuesday night. So if we can show that you have taken proactive steps, the application's in, you are in the process of upgrading. We did put a heavy emphasis on power when we were starting to do this, so, I don't think we can let a negative letter go forward without showing positive steps to, remedy it.
And it is addressed in condition 12.
Yeah, I saw that. I just wanna be able to show anybody that their application's in, they are getting upgraded. That makes sense.
You're gonna be using enough power that I see Applicat Electric is gonna, want to upgrade you so that you
Yes.
can have you paying those bills every
That's why we're using some hasn't been.
Any other comments? And you have in here, under odor control, exterior walls will be sprayed with urethane. So what's this gonna look like?
Oh, the interior of the exterior walls.
Well, interior, okay, it's not
Yeah,
like this.
it's gutted, so before we sheetrock the interior walls, we're spraying the inside surface.
We are redoing the exterior of the building, it will look like a brand new building. We decided.
I have a warehouse very close to this, that it's nice to step building and have something done, but it's like people have tried for the last 10, 15 years.
It's been vacant for almost 20 years.
It's a big building.
No, it'll look new, we'll have a new parking lot, new site.
Positive economic development for the town.
Well, it's a shame because that's the hotel district now, and
It's
it's not
perfect
the
for
ugly
us.
building right there. That's right. Tourism.
This is across the street.
So any more comments from anyone?
Quick question.
Dave?
If it was determined that you had to provide a type of feasibility for physically have space on site to provide it,
Unfortunately, we do. We lost 4 spaces. We still have a code minimum, 16 required. But where we put a parallel spot here for a 17th, there is room here for a type D loading berth.
or if the non-conforming termination was not favorable to you, if it was determined.
But we already have it in writing. I I know anything's
Right.
possible.
Yes,
Yes,
I just wanna make sure that physically, if needed, you can provide it there.
Well, and the other thing, you know, if we were to lose the battle completely on the type A, we can scale back our cultivation space and turn 1,000 feet into something else and get under 12,000 feet. I mean, that would be, if we absolutely had to, that would be a worst case scenario. And this, the thing about this was just to show that with the turning radiuses of a type A berth, I mean, for an existing lot to accommodate one would be very unusual. I mean, this is the kind of space we need to accommodate the turning radiuses to get in and out of a type A berth, to make it a legal functioning type A berth. It's, you know, twice as big as our entire parking lot, so there's no way we can make this spot work with a type A berth.
Type A will work, maybe.
I can tell you, you've been through this rodeo before. That's helpful for me to see because that looks like overkill to me. But I understand what you're saying about non-conforming. My question is, I mean, common sense tells me you need some sort of loading facility or cultivation.
We actually have an off-site warehouse we're going down, and that's where everything's gonna go. We don't have a lot of storage in this building. This is set up specifically for cultivation. So most of our materials and supplies are off-site, and we'll bring them at
Yeah, everything
basis with
everything
a flatbed
comes to
truck.
site, yeah, pick up for.
So all
It'll
your,
be after hours.
I guess my point is all your loading and unloading, I imagine, you're gonna have to get in and out of your facility to
Yes.
load and unload for security reasons and all that kind of stuff. So somehow you're gonna have to accommodate that. So that's why I say that's a bit overkill, but you're gonna have to have some sort of way to accommodate your transportation. You expect to do that all, basically all your loading and stuff interior to the facility and then transporting it out, right?
Well, we're vertically integrated, so our building has manufacturing inside of it as well as retail. So when we transfer the marijuana to retail manufacturing, we'll literally be walking it into the county property, which is secure, so.
Yeah, the only thing we'll have coming in any sort of quantities is feed nutrients and planting medium. And, that'll be brought over from our other warehouse and pick up most commonly. And then just load it, back into one of the normal parking spaces adjacent to one of the doors, sometime when retail's not open, so the spot's not busy anyway.
So this just, so any kind of large transport, it wouldn't be product leaving your truck so much that you need a big truck. It's the supplies coming in, that's the bulk of the stuff.
And we won't be accepting mail at this location or receiving third-party deliveries. All deliveries will be off-site to our warehouse. Because we're secure.
Yeah.
But what if your retail, when that comes up, you'll have your own product, will you only sell your own product, or will you maybe get some from other growers?
At this point, it's
Our
just our
intention is to just be self-contained, not bring product anymore.
So will you be wholesaling to other retailers?
No.
It's not our intention.
Once you have everything going, your report said there won't be interior doors connecting any of them, and is that a rule? We've seen that there
There
are.
are three
That's
separate licenses in the state.
It's a state issue because we are licensing them under different entities.
But I think they can have
'Cause
doors.
They can have doors if they're secured, but they can't share, restricted access areas if they're different entities. If they were the same entities, if we used one entity for all of the businesses, then we would be able to have doors.
Is it same ownership for all the entities?
It is, and there's a chance that we're gonna, regret that, but we had some reasons for doing it initially. May or may not make
It
sense.
seems more secure to have an internal door than to be carrying it outside in the front door.
Well, the state wants their $50 an ounce transfer, so it's literally leaving one facility, transfer agreement, going to another facility, being received. So it's a lot cleaner.
That's all within their gates, and it'll happen in the morning before retail's open. And it's the transfer from there to retail is just,
30 feet.
20 feet away.
Now, this only deals with cultivation though.
Right.
And I know people are coming and saying we're gonna do retail too, but we're not giving you a retail license, just cultivation. Correct. I want to make sure everybody understands that.
Well, I understand, we have, one at Arctic coming fairly soon, that thing, and he did share
more and more. I thought I had it all figured out.
But you only have to pay the $50 amounts one time.
Correct.
If they want some money, we want our money from the state.
That's right.
Well, you get your 5% on retail.
Yeah, but we're not getting the money you give them immediately.
Right.
The state's trying to determine what we need to use.
Yeah, there's the rules of 30 days, but.
It's like the definition is.
So-
Sorry, go ahead.
I'm sorry, are you guys actually getting part of that?
We get half of,
Excise tax?
we get half of the application fee.
Theoretically.
So,
We'll get it.
Mr. Chair, I'll make a recommendation that we move this application forward to the Assembly for consideration.
I'll second that.
Any opposition? Okay, we'll do it. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I just want to point out that we didn't need to discuss the notwithstanding provision because this is a B3.
So from your perspective, this project's working all right for you?
Yeah. And we spent a lot of time in permitting, that's what we've done for the last 15 years, through the design build.
That's why I was like, I could just tell. They've been through this before.
So it's easier for us than it's probably for everybody. I think it needs to have.
Never know. I didn't know we had a work session, so I'm the wrong guy to ask.
We'll get better as we go. I think the possibility is more as we go further, but, you know, like I said, I mean, we're